The Provisional Irish Republican Army was an Irish Republican paramilitary organisation that sought to remove Northern Ireland from the United Kingdom and to bring about an independent republic encompassing all of Ireland. It was the biggest and most active Republican paramilitary group during the Troubles. It saw itself as the successor to the original IRA and called itself simply the Irish Republican Army, or Óglaigh hÉireann in Irish. It was also widely referred to as such by others. The Provisional IRA emerged in December 1969, following a split in the Republican movement. The Troubles had begun a year before, when a largely Catholic, non-violent civil rights campaign was met with violence from both Ulster Loyalists and the Royal Ulster Constabulary, culminating in the August 1969 riots and deployment of British troops. The IRA initially focused on defence, but it began an offensive campaign in 1971. The IRA's primary goal was to force the British to negotiate a withdrawal from Northern Ireland. It used guerrilla tactics against the British Army and RUC in both rural and urban areas. It also carried out a bombing campaign in Northern Ireland and England against what it saw as political and economic targets. The IRA called a final ceasefire in July 1997 after Sinn-Féin was readmitted into the Northern Ireland peace talks. It supported the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, and in 2005 it disarmed under international supervision. Several splinter groups have emerged, including the Continuity IRA after the Provisional's initial 1994 ceasefire, and the Real IRA after the final 1997 ceasefire, both of which are still active today in the low-level dissident Irish Republican campaign. Overview of strategies. The IRA's initial strategy was to use force to cause the collapse of the government of Northern Ireland and to inflict enough casualties on British forces that the British government would be forced by public opinion in Britain to withdraw from the region. This policy involved recruitment of volunteers, increasing after the 1972 Bloody Sunday incident in which the British armed forces killed unarmed protesters, and launching attacks against British military and economic targets. The campaign was supported by arms and funding from Libya and from some Irish American groups. The IRA agreed to a ceasefire in February 1975, which lasted nearly a year before the IRA concluded that the British were drawing them away from military action without offering any guarantees in relation to the IRA's goals, and hopes of a quick victory receded. As a result, the IRA launched a new strategy known as the Long War. This saw them conduct a war of attrition against the British and increased emphasis on political activity via the political party Sinn-Féin. The success of the 1981 Irish hunger strike in mobilising support and winning elections led to the armour-right and ballot box strategy, with more time and resources devoted to political activity. The abortive attempt at an escalation of the military part of that strategy led Republican leaders increasingly to look for a political compromise to end the conflict, with a broadening dissociation of Sinn-Féin from the IRA. Following negotiations with the Social Democratic and Labour Party and secret talks with representatives of both the British and Irish governments, the IRA ultimately called a ceasefire in 1994 on the understanding that Sinn-Féin would be included in political negotiations for a settlement. When the British government, dependent on Ulster Unionist Party votes at Westminster, then demanded the disarmament of the IRA before it allowed Sinn-Féin into multi-party talks, the IRA called off its ceasefire in February 1996. The British demand was quickly dropped after the May 1997 general election in the UK. The Irish ceasefire was then reinstated in July 1997 and Sinn Féin was admitted into all-party talks, which produced the Good Friday Agreement of 1998. The IRA's armed campaign, primarily in Northern Ireland but also in England and mainland Europe, caused the deaths of approximately 1,800 people. The dead included around 1,100 members of the British security forces, and about 640 civilians. The IRA itself lost 275 to 300 members and an estimated 10,000 imprisoned at various times over the 30-year period. On the 28th of July 2005, the IRA Army Council announced an end to its armed campaign, stating that it would work to achieve its aims using purely political and democratic programs through exclusively peaceful means, and shortly afterwards completed decommissioning. In September 2008, the 19th report of the Independent Monitoring Commission stated that the IRA was committed to the political path and no longer represented a threat to peace or to democratic politics, and that the Army Council was no longer operational or functional. The organization remains classified as a proscribed terrorist group in the UK and is an illegal organization in the Republic of Ireland. Two small groups split from the Provisional IRA, the Continuity IRA in 1986, and the Real IRA in 1997. Both reject the Good Friday Agreement and continue to engage in paramilitary activity. On the 26th of July 2012, it was announced that some former members of the Provisional Irish Republican Army were merging with the Real Irish Republican Army, other independent Republican paramilitary groups and the vigilante group Republican Action Against Drugs into a unified formation known simply as the Irish Republican Army. This new IRA group is estimated by Police Service of Northern Ireland intelligence sources to have between 250 and 300 active militants and many more supporting associates. Organization. The Provisional IRA was organized hierarchically. At the top of the organization was the IRA Army Council, headed by the IRA Chief of Staff. Leadership. All levels of the organization were entitled to send delegates to IRA General Army Conventions. The GAC was the IRA's supreme decision-making authority. Before 1969, GACs met regularly. Since 1969, there have only been three, in 1970, 1986, and 2005. Owing to the difficulty in organizing such a large gathering of an illegal organization in secret, the GAC in turn elected a 12-member IRA executive, which selected 7 volunteers to form the IRA Army Council. For day-to-day purposes, authority was vested in the Army Council, which, as well as directing policy and taking major tactical decisions, appointed a chief of staff from one of its number or, less often, from outside its ranks. The chief of staff would appoint an adjutant general as well as a general headquarters, which consisted of heads of the following departments: armory, finance, engineering, training, intelligence, publicity, operations, security, regional command. The IRA was divided into a Northern Command, which operated in the 9 Ulster counties as well as the border counties of Leitrim and Louth, and a Southern Command, operating in the rest of Ireland. The Provisional IRA was originally commanded by leadership based in Dublin. However, in 1977, parallel to the introduction of cell structures at local level, command of the war zone was given to the Northern Command. According to Ed Maloney, these moves at reorganization were the idea of Ivor Bell, Jerry Adams and Brian Keenan. Brigades. The IRA referred to its ordinary members as volunteers. Up until the late 1970s, IRA volunteers were organized in units based on conventional military structures. The volunteers living in one area formed a company as part of a battalion, which could be part of a brigade, although many battalions were not attached to a brigade. IRA brigades usually followed county lines, which were sometimes subdivided. The Belfast Brigade had 3 battalions, in the west, north and east of the city. In the early years of the Troubles, the IRA in Belfast expanded rapidly. In August 1969, the Belfast Brigade had just 50 active members. By the end of 1971, it had 1,200 members, giving it a large but loosely controlled structure. The Derry Battalion became the Provisional Irish Derry Brigade in 1972 after a rapid increase in membership following Bloody Sunday, when one para killed 13 unarmed demonstrators at a civil rights march. The Derry Brigade also controlled parts of northern County Londonderry and northeast County Donegal. County Armagh had 4 battalions, 2 very active ones in South Armagh and 2 less active units in North Armagh. For this reason, the Armagh IRA unit is often referred to as the South Armagh Brigade. Similarly, the Tyrone Monaghan Brigade, which operated from around the border of Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, is often called the East Tyrone Brigade. The leadership structure at battalion and company level was the same. Each had its own commanding officer, quartermaster, explosives officer and intelligence officer. There was sometimes a training officer, a finance officer. Active service units. From 1973, the IRA started to move away from the larger conventional military organizational principle owing to its security vulnerability. A system of 2 parallel types of unit within an IRA brigade was introduced in place of the battalion structures. Firstly, the old company structures were used for tasks such as policing nationalist areas, intelligence gathering, and hiding weapons. These were essential support activities. However, the bulk of actual attacks were the responsibility of a second type of unit, the active service unit. To improve security and operational capacity, these ASUs were smaller, tight-knit cells, usually consisting of 5 to 8 members. The ASU's weapons were controlled by a brigade's quartermaster. It was estimated that in the late 1980s the IRA had roughly 300 members in ASUS and about another 450 serving in supporting roles. The exception to this reorganization was the South Armagh Brigade, which retained its traditional hierarchy and battalion structure and used relatively large numbers of volunteers in its actions. South Armagh didn't have the same problems with security that other brigades had. The IRA's Southern Command, located in the Republic of Ireland, consists of a Dublin Brigade and a number of smaller units in rural areas. These were charged mainly with the importation and storage of arms for the northern units and with raising finances through robberies and other means.